Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to TMACOG's second water wastewater training opportunities for 2021. Just wanted to let everyone know that we're going to be starting at about 12:05 to allow everyone time to be able to get into this session. So after we allow those few minutes to get everyone connected and address any technical issues, then I'll get started on the actual webinar and introductions about 12:05. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to TMACOG's 2021 Water Wastewater Training, Session 2. We have a number of good presentations today for everyone to tune into, but I'd like to start off this with talking about a few different, just an overview of how this webinar will work and to make sure that everyone can get their credit hours for attending today. So thank you for attending our water and wastewater operator training for the second year of using the web-based format. My name is Matt Kennedy, and I'm a water quality planner here at TMACOG. And I'm joined by two other TMACOG staff members, Kari Gerwin and Sarah Geyer. Kari and Sarah will be administering the polls and taking questions for our speakers. I'd like to give a big thank you to Jones and Henry Engineers for sponsoring this once again, and to our presenters for their time and preparing this valuable training. Today's agenda will include presentations on the management of water and wastewater treatment residuals by Bill Petruzzi of Hull & Associates, and Asset Management Program Rules by Jill Schiefer of the OEPA Division of Drinking and Groundwaters. Before I get started, I'd like to give a brief overview of our webinar format. The way we're going to organize this is it'll be the first presentation will be about an hour from 12:15 or 12:10 to 1:10, and then we'll have a 5-minute break in between presentations. And then we'll have the second one, which will run from about 1:15 till 2:15. Just to let everyone know, the way this webinar will work is that all attendees will be muted, but we encourage everyone to participate in the discussion by using the questions function over on the right-hand side of the GoToWebinar tooltip. You can find this where this question box will be monitored, and these questions will be posed by TMACOG staff members. Any questions not answered during this webinar will be addressed afterwards. And I'd like to just kind of reiterate that we really appreciate that people could pose questions to really make this a little bit more interactive, since it is the challenge of being in a web-based format. It really helps to try and provide those questions so we can get that interaction between the attendees and our presenters. During this webinar, you'll be asked to participate in 4 polls throughout each presentation. You'll be required to complete the majority of these polls, so that would be 3 out of 4 for each presentation. And then those polls will help the presenters get a better understanding of the information that's being presented and any feedback with that. And also they go towards your webinar participation score. And more on this participation score in a moment. You'll be asked to participate in a survey at the end of the webinar as well. This is a mandatory component of your participation score, but now we'll have Sarah launch a test poll so that you have an opportunity to try this out before the actual session begins. So Sarah, if you could launch that poll. And normally what we'll do is during the presentations, we'll provide some questions to the presenters to get a little bit of extra information as we're going through these, so we're kind of not just staring at each other on the presentation screen.
And right now we have 88% of participants that have voted in the poll.
Well, just a couple more minutes. As I said, this is just the test to be able to get everyone familiar with how this is going to work. So Sarah, if you want to go ahead and close that poll so then we can move on to the rest of the announcements. So you'll just follow that similar format as the presentations. As we work through the presentations, there'll be natural breaks for those to come up, and then you can provide your answers in that. So today's webinar has been approved for 2 credit hours, 1 for wastewater and 1 for drinking water, and 1 for both wastewater and drinking water operator contact hours. To provide these contact hours, OEPA has required us to monitor attendance and participation. In order to receive your full contact hours, you must have the webinar open as your active screen for at least 90% of the time during the training event. This means you cannot use other apps or windows during this webinar. As I mentioned earlier, you must participate in 3 of the 4 GoToWebinar polls in each presentation. However, your answers will not be graded and accuracy will not count towards your participation score. Immediately following the webinar and before you log out, you'll be asked to take a mandatory survey. The survey also counts towards your participation score. Any technology issues, such as loss of Wi-Fi, will not change these participation requirements. And if you lose your connection, please try to reconnect as soon as possible. Today's webinar will include 2 presentations with a 5-minute break in between the presentations. And during the break, please do not log out of the webinar and keep it as your main screen. I would also like to note that the TMACOG contact hour request form, if you haven't received that previously, you can go to the handouts section in the GoToWebinar tooltip and download it from there. Now, with those announcements out of the way, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Bill Petruzzi is a leader in Hull and Associates Material and Waste Management practice. He holds a bachelor's degree of science in geology with a minor in mathematics from Youngstown State University. He completed his Master's of Science coursework in geology with an emphasis in hydrogeology from the University of Toledo. His areas of expertise include strategic planning, materials and waste management, beneficial use, environmental monitoring and compliance programs, waste characterization and harvesting, geochemical evaluations, water management and permitting and compliance, corrective measures, brownfield redevelopment, and research and development. He is responsible for project development, client management, permitting, compliance, regulatory negotiations, consensus building, rule writing, advocacy initiatives, and technical expertise and litigation support. Bill is a registered professional geologist, as well as being on the board of directors of the American Coal Ash Association and the Midwest Coal Ash Association. Bill is a member of the ASTM E50.03 subcommittee that developed the standard for harvesting CCP material from storage units. He is continuing efforts with the group as the lead author for the new ASTM standard on storage unit CCP characterization for beneficial use. He has multiple publications and has lectured at universities and conferences. Bill has worked in Hull's Toledo office since 1987. So as you can see, he has quite a wealth of experience, and we're really looking forward to his presentation. So now I'm going to hand it off to Bill so that he can get started.
Okay, here I am. Welcome everybody. I'm hoping you can hear me and the technology is working just fine. Wanted to say thanks and appreciate your participation over the lunch hour. Hope you can stay with it. I know there's some Q&A along the way, so think about when you run for your coffee so that you don't miss the questions and miss it on your credit. Also want to thank TMACOG for having us. Matt, Carrie, Sarah have been very helpful in putting this together. Like Matt said, we'll probably go about 45 minutes with the presentation, leave some time for Q&A. I may run short or long, depending on how much I talk. So we'll just see how that goes. I know Ohio EPA has done a lot with certifying operators over the years, so it's nice TMACOG is also stepping in and providing a forum for talking with the group. And so we'll get going. I guess I'd want to start with an overall observation that plant operators, the people involved on a day-to-day basis, you all know your programs and processes better than anybody. And I'm speaking today really from an environmental perspective in my role as a consultant to different organizations. When it comes down to some of the technical aspects of design and operation, I count on John Hall, Alan Brown, some of the likes of that within our group. So today I'm going to share a little bit of an overview, kind of hit on some topics that I think are push button topics. Understanding that roles change, technologies change, drivers like compliance, community needs. It's important to monitor your programs and be prepared to adapt as things change over time. So I guess largely, having been in the waste market for 35 years, something over the last decade that's received a lot more attention is beneficial use. So I think today I'll be talking a lot about beneficial use, practices that some of you have applied for years already. It's kind of new to some of the public, and how people perceive beneficial use from risk compliance, economics, looking at risk aversion, community needs, really applying equivalencies in programs, and looking at sustainability. They're all kind of issues that roll into beneficial use. So anytime we meet with the group at Hall, safety is a core value, and just want to throw up a slide here on safety for the group. As we evolve out of our COVID challenges here, I'm noting a lot when I get back out in the field visiting sites, people are not used to being out and about, and we're starting to come together again. And I call it COVID wandering, but it's just a little bit of people coming back to project sites and trying to herd and keep them together as you're doing site walkthroughs in plants or at sites. And so I just bring up the point that you need to keep your visitors herded. Remind them about slip, trips, and falls, some of the standard safety protocol that you've always applied at your site, that when you do have people visiting, just maybe spend a little more time in making sure you're keeping the group together and people aren't wandering, resulting in potential safety concerns. Just a few big picture observations here that everybody out there wants clean water, they want sanitary conditions. People want a clean environment. It's always been that way. How we achieve that is sometimes a challenge, and sometimes how we interact with the community. But again, the operators know what you're doing more than anybody, and so I appreciate that. Some things change over time. I mentioned earlier, compliance criteria, regulations, technology, and I understand economics are tough with any municipality. Out there, we all do our best to do what we can with what we have and maintain compliance while thinking about the future. And beneficial use is really a tool to help us look at the economics and achieve sustainable materials and waste management program as it applies to water and wastewater. I would note too, in preparing for this, and I work a lot with the EPA on projects, engaging with them. It's really, really appreciate that they're promoting legitimate beneficial uses relating to the diversion of materials from landfills and to conserve raw materials. And we've come a long way as a group working with the agency over the years on engaging beneficial use. Today, I'm going to hit on two silos, one water and one wastewater. There is some overlap between the two common themes, but I am going to separate water from wastewater and go from there. I guess what's not included today is I'm not talking about system design, the process analysis, special technical cases, sticking to big picture views of material management as it relates to waste from both processes, water and wastewater. So we're going to hit on a first question. I've embedded 4 of them here. I'm not sure what order they're going to end up with other questions, but I'll turn it back to TMACOG to pose the question.
Okay, so this first question is, are you confident that you understand your water and wastewater? Oops, sorry, I covered it up with the window here. Hold on. Waste management programs and are planning for the future. And the potential answers are yes, somewhat, no, or not sure.
And Bill, while we're waiting for those responses to come in, I've got a question for you. Can you give us your opinion on how you think Ohio EPA is embracing beneficial use and how their perception and willingness to support beneficial use has evolved?
Sure. I think, you know, from the biosolids program on the wastewater side of things, beneficial use has always kind of been embedded in the program, or it has been for some time. And so I think that taking some of those principles, some things they understand about risk and waste diversion, and really the regulated community reaching back saying we need tools in our toolbox to be able to manage materials safely and responsibly, but look at the economics, I think that we've come a long way with the agency. So I'll hit on it in my talk, but they started beneficial use byproduct rules, 599 rules, a couple years ago after a lot of encouragement from the community, and they really have a great response on beneficial use of some high volume, low toxicity materials that are in their rules, and really looking at equivalencies between raw materials and some things that are perceived as co-products, byproducts, waste materials. And I think they're really jumping in and helping people within the framework of the regulations to apply beneficial use principles.
All right, thanks. Sarah, how's our poll coming along?
We haven't had any more answers in quite some time now, so I'm going to go ahead and close it, and we'll look at the results. Okay, it looks like most people are falling in that either yes or somewhat, and just a few don't have that confidence in the programs at this time.
Okay. Well, I'll jump ahead then. Some of these questions are softballs, but I think they kind of fit and frame the talk. We can talk more later. So I'll jump into the drinking water treatment material section. Some people use the term treatment residuals, some people use material. EPA uses the term drinking water treatment material. So on this side here, I've just kind of listed from our process engineers here that common treatment methods applied to drinking water. Technology is evolving, but really there's a variety of material or waste that are generated as part of the process. In the context of Ohio EPA's general permitting program, which I'm going to discuss here, I have a definition posted here about calling these materials that result byproducts, but the real focus here is on lime softening materials, or spent lime. Some of these materials that are generated aren't spent lime, and they may end up in a landfill. They may be recycled. You may even have liquid waste that you manage differently. But the lime softening from this common treatment process, the media, that spent media that comes from this, is really what we're focusing on. So I guess it was about a year or two ago, I talked to a TMACOG water quality committee. I was just invited to come in and talk about a little bit about beneficial use, and I was really amazed at the interest and the knowledge base with the operators, the plant operators, that they were really on top of what was happening with Ohio EPA's beneficial use rules, and also we're able to flag some of the evolving needs or ideas that they were dealing with. And EPA was at the table at that meeting, so that was when I first started talking with TMACOG members about this. And something that came up right away is the drinking water treatment materials are solid waste. And we'll dig deeper into that, kicking around the different types of waste that were out there. Of course, lime is the highest volume and came to the forefront. I think from a definition perspective, there are some different regulations and different rules. Some call the lime materials material. Some people call it a byproduct. Some people call it a waste. But I'm looking forward to just calling it a byproduct and leaving it at that. Move on here. When it comes to a regulatory authority, when I did talk to the group a few years ago, I just kind of threw up a list, and it was like people in the water treatment operations business can deal with a lot of regulations and different regulatory agencies. Some of them apply to everybody, some of them apply to one person, anywhere from dealing with ODNR, if you have dam permits with your impoundments, or ODA when you're looking at your liming permit. And EPA has a whole slew of ways that they can get involved, cradle to grave with your operation. But I think that largely focusing on what EPA is doing with their beneficial use rules is what we're going to hit on today. And really for the wastewater treatment plant people, they're dealing a lot more, not with the solid waste group who are doing beneficial use, but more so the NPDES surface water group at the agency. Oops, gonna advance here. So when it comes to the drinking water treatment material management, really you could beneficially use the material, you could landfill it, or you could recycle it. And within the context of beneficial use, land application for agronomic benefits is by far the highest volume, most preferred method. Currently, over 100 facilities in Ohio are using lime softening in their process. I'm surprised at that number. And I think that given that, talking with some of the facility operators, they have different practices. And back in 2019, I talked to someone who had a 90-10 split on what they were doing with their material, landfilling versus land application, with 90% going to a landfill, 10% I'm sorry, 90% to the landfill versus 10% to land application. And then in 2020, they've turned it around and there's a trend to do more land application where they had only 10% going to a landfill and 90% being land applied. So thanks to some of the operators for sharing that information. The land application as well as landfilling, we all know the challenge is getting the water out. Our material's wet and it's costly. To go to landfill, you have to meet past the liquid limit test, and beneficial use, you have to stabilize your material, really, dewater it before you land apply. And I'd make a comment out there that talking to operators and talking to landfills, that there's really not a big interest in landfills accepting the treatment materials. A little bit messy, hard for them to handle sometimes operationally. And geotechnically, they can only accept so much material because they have to make sure that the landfill's stable from a slope perspective. I will say, I know there's people out there, Dayton Lime Reclamation, they're doing some material recycling. I don't see people in a TMACOG group doing that, but maybe somebody will correct me if I'm wrong there. Okay. So here we are. Some of us out there, maybe some people in this group, fought for years. Not really fought is a good word, but really communicated with industry, Ohio EPA, municipalities about beneficial use rules. And like I said, the wastewater people with biosolids really engaged the concept of beneficial use earlier. When it came to the drinking water treatment material, which is a solid waste and regulated, needed to fit that within the context of some new regulations. So I've cited a rule here that applies to 5 waste streams. These were high volume, low toxicity materials that the Ohio EPA had identified. They felt they had a lot of data on to experiment with rolling out these 599 rules. And what the rules did is allowed you to work with these materials and turn them into a beneficial use byproduct and not be a waste anymore. So you could see that item 2 I've highlighted there really applies to the public water systems. Okay. EPA defines beneficial use. Again, you'll find different definitions in different places, but it really involves the substitution of these materials instead of virgin materials into an application. Material has to have a functional benefit to the end use. It can't constitute disposal, and it can't cause pollution in waters of the state. So those were kind of their overriding principles when they were developing the definition. I will say that there is a way to beneficially use materials in non-agronomic applications, and the 599 rules have a kind of a cutout for using of this material in construction applications beyond agronomics. Okay. So I would say here that beneficial use is very green, and some people are stuck in their old ways and consider beneficial disposal, which is wrong. It's really, we're conserving resources. It's really, we're being responsible with our resources, and we're conserving landfill space and really providing an agronomic benefit using the liming material to condition our soil in agronomic applications. So I have always said to people, and sometimes people sick of me saying it, but this used to be a waste is always a waste. And there was nothing you can do. There were some programs out there, the IWAMP and LAMP, the material was still considered a waste. But these 599 rules that came out allowed us to call these drinking water treatment materials as a beneficial use byproduct if it met the criteria specified. I think that branding is important. I think it's important for the community to know that really this is a green practice we're applying. It's done responsibly, and it's just a good thing. I don't think we're so good at touting that. I think it really helps us with sustainability. We're avoiding the depletion of natural resources to maintain an ecological balance. That's what people call sustainability. There's three pillars of sustainability: economic, social, and environmental. I think our beneficial uses hit on all those things. So what helps us economically and gives us a management option to land apply for agronomic benefits really fits well with sustainability. And I would qualify that regardless out there, less and less landfills are interested in receiving this material. I think it's going to be a challenge for all of us in the future, and maybe need to adapt and do some planning. So with that, we come to question number 2.
All right, and so this is asking if you would consider beneficial use for your, and Bill, if you can help me out, I'm blanking on the acronym there.
Yeah, drinking water treatment material.
Okay, thank you. Based on your current understanding of Ohio EPA's programs. So that's a yes, no, or maybe for this answer.
Bill, you talked a bit about the regulations and the administrative code. Do you think that there's room for improvement in these beneficial use regulations?
Well, I do think that based on people characterizing their materials they want to beneficially use, and based on some success stories, that the program can be improved over time, and it will. So there's a 5-year rule review that's required of the EPA, and they're currently getting into that for the 599 rule. And that will come forward here in a minute, but I think that something I'm advocating for is also adding another category. So I think within drinking water treatment material and biosolid world, or really drinking water treatment material world, We will want to refine and improve these. I know some people with AWWA have spent some time with the agency as the new general permits have been written to propose some changes, and I think EPA had their ears open largely, and so this 5-year rule review is a good thing. And also as part of it, I'm advocating to add another category, which is other materials that meet the performance standards or specifications to be used in beneficial use applications that are equivalent to raw materials. So for example, if you have a material that doesn't fall on the list of approved materials right now, to give these people a chance to add and have the benefits of calling the material no longer a waste but a beneficial use byproduct by allowing it to get added to the list of approved materials in the regulations. And I'm hoping that will get included under an other category in the 599 rules.
We'll have to keep up to speed as those rules are finalized. I'm going to check in with Sarah and see how we're doing with our poll.
It looks like everyone has answered, so I'll share the results. It looks like the majority, so 68%, are definitely interested in beneficial use, and then the rest of the group is a maybe, and just 1 or 2 are no for that.
Okay, well, good. Good, and I know today I'm talking to, and from my previous meeting with the group, really a broad spectrum of communities that have different technologies. They're generating different volumes of materials, and everybody will have a, based on their locality and economics, will have different decision criteria they apply to where and how they manage their material. And so I'm not surprised with the spread of answers there. Okay, so there's a new general permit. And again, my friends at AWWA and some people out there know that the old general permits under 599 have or are expiring, and the new permits needed to be issued. EPA issued separate permits for groundwater systems versus surface water systems as far as your source for your water supply, basically adding Microassistant into the general permit for surface water sourced waters. So they issued 2 separate general permits, one for groundwater, one for surface water. The sections in them are all the same. Microassistant inclusion is really the only difference. What's new in it is the microsystem loading limits have been established, and really from a record keeping perspective, the rate calculations are not required in some of the reporting. As these general permits advance, they're going to require that if you have a land application monitoring management plan, they're going to want you to move over to a general permit or an individual permit under the 599 program. And so we have these new general permits that came out, and they're also looking at the 5-year rule review again with the that has to be completed by the end of 2022. If you say, what if I want to use my liming material under this permit? Then it would apply as far as applicability. It would, anybody who has an expired permit, if you have an expired lamp, or if you had no previous permits out there. Pretty much everybody's going to be eligible for it as long as your material is not hazardous. You're within the microsystem threshold they're establishing in the general permit, and you don't exceed your metal concentration limits that you're required to characterize. And there's no microsystem standard in the general permit for groundwater sourced drinking water. Thinking about this, we'll just move on to the next one so I don't get caught up here. As far as the general permit, I want to say that I have some information in here. EPA, as they're releasing these general permits, I've been talking with them. They were helpful with providing some information I've lifted from a presentation they're rolling out on their YouTube channel. So they've recorded a training program as these general permits come out. And again, I've borrowed some information. Harry Sarvis and the team were very helpful with sharing some information. The key components of what's in the general permit I've listed here. I won't read to you, but I feel that well, they're the same as the last general permit. I think they considered some comments AWWA members included in there. I think that some people still feel things are conservative in there about looking at some of the microassistant and some of the setback criteria. But I think this will evolve with different iterations of the rules over time. I think it's still taking it's not taking a lot of time to turn around authorization of the permits, and they won't under the new program. I know that as of 2020, EPA issued 20 beneficial use permits for drinking water treatment material. Of those permits, 15 were general and 5 were individual. And since the new general permits were posted on June 2nd, 2021, they've issued 4 coverage letters. So people are embracing this. This is what your $200 will get for you. On the right, I've listed off the website there the application package, what it takes to apply to get an EPA permit. $200. You need your lab data from your characterization. You have to do some stats, which I'll talk about, and complete an NOI form. Also have to demonstrate it's not hazardous, so nothing really that different there. And the permittee, sometimes this confuses me, but it can range from the generator to the end user and the distributor in between. On the metal sampling, this is some tricky sampling. This wasn't us doing the sampling, but somebody that we had worked with. They were sampling an impoundment in the photo there looks a little challenging. But anyways, so you have to sample for metals like before. You're collecting up to 8 samples, and you can, as the materials being generated, 1 to 2 samples a week. And if you have to go into your lagoons, EPA has some guidance on that, as in the photo. They wanted to get representative samples in the lagoon. So they gridded it off, did some random sampling, and sometimes it's difficult to get those samples. There's some criteria in there about microsystem sampling, but I won't dig into the small details right now. Microsystem, I just had a slide from one of our risk assessors here, but you all know that a few years ago with the cyanobacteria in the lake and the resulting microcystin, which is a toxin, people had a concern about post-treatment of water, what's in the residuals, and are we concentrating microcystin that will be land applied. And Ohio EPA worked with OSU and others, and I think it's not as big of a problem as anybody had a concern with. I'm sure somebody might want to argue with me, but I think that it's fine to monitor for. You want to comply, and there will be some loading criteria that will get applied for soil where there's microsystem detected. So there is some microsystem sampling. Again, I don't want to dig into this at this point, but you're going to sample your materials as they're generated, and then Also, if you're going to go into your lagoons to harvest that material for land application for agronomic purposes, you're going to have to look at the date when you last emptied your lagoon and modify your sampling approach accordingly. When it comes to looking at your data, EPA has listed these compliance limits for metals. They came from the US EPA RSLs, some of the US EPA 503 metal levels, and then there's some, I call them arbitrary limits for some individual parameters. I don't see that people have a hard time meeting these concentration-based limits, and the EPA has also confirmed that. Then based on your Microassistant results from your testing, again, for surface water sourced systems, there's some loading criteria they've applied. Again, I don't think anybody will have a problem meeting this, but they did look at the tonnage you're going to apply and consider loading and come up with a microassistant limit. So that's all pretty straightforward. And then there's some things that EPA is communicating on land application conditions as far as setbacks from wells and waterways, 33 feet from surface waters. I don't think, I think philosophically, if this material is looked at just like any other product, we really shouldn't limit how or where we use it. But I understand that we do want to be responsible, and sometimes having these criteria make people more comfortable, or there is an environmental reason for doing that. But with land application, I view beneficial use byproducts are safe to use anywhere a regular product is, as long as your proper engineering controls are in place. There's some land application additional conditions about setbacks, about fields with drains, and then there's some things on temporary storage that need to be considered also. And then with record keeping, as under the general permit, you're going to have to keep your records for 5 years. You're going to have your liming permit, in hand. This is all things you just keep a file of, and you submit an annual report April 1st. I don't think it's too cumbersome. They've tried to streamline what they need to have reported. And I think some people work with the agency over time to talk about that. So that's really bringing me towards the end of the water portion of this talk. There are some emerging issues out there. There's a lot of lime being produced out there, and there's limited landfill availability or interest in accepting this materials. I think planning forward, we need to think, and you need to look at alternatives or different management strategies, or if something new needs developed. I think that blending materials, when you're beneficially using the material, sometimes you don't meet product specifications. Sometimes you don't meet use compliance standards from a concentration basis, and EPA's allowing you to blend materials to meet your specifications. And so the microsystem issue is before us, and I think we'll stay there for a while. PFAS is the new thing. Some things with public perception, letting people know what we're doing is safe, responsible, and green is important. And I don't know if coming down the road, if people are going to look at incentives to help them promote beneficial use principles or not, but certainly that would make things easier if there was a little acknowledgement of your efforts. The next slide I have here is really talking about PFAS. I'll leave that to the risk assessors, but it's what's being called a forever chemical. People across the spectrum believe different things about it. But I think people in Michigan, people on the East Coast are really ahead of the curve looking at it. What needs regulated, what doesn't. It's a chemical that's used in textiles, cardboard, food packaging that enters the environment that's really resistant to degradation. So I'm not an expert on PFAS. I do know in talking with people, it is an issue, and both in the water and wastewater world, it may be nothing, it may be something. There may be federal rules, there may be state rules, but it's something that I would consider an emerging issue. Okay, and we've hit upon question number 3 and ended the water section of the talk.
All right, question 3, is the public appreciative of beneficial use practices as they are sustainable and support conservation and agronomic goals? And you can answer yes, somewhat, no, or not sure.
And Bill, as we're waiting for folks to get their polling questions in, I'm just going to do a quick time check. It looks like we have about 15 minutes left for your presentation. We don't have a ton of questions coming in through the chat box, so if you want to use that entire remaining 15 minutes, I think you'll be fine to do so.
Good.
And Sarah, how are we doing with the poll?
Yep, it looks like everyone has answered. So let me go ahead and close the poll. Okay, it looks like most are thinking that the public is somewhat appreciative. That's 65% of you, so.
Okay, good. Not surprised with the response. Sometimes we just want business to roll out as usual. Sometimes we want to call attention that we are really applying sustainable practices. So I would just say that, with that, it's up to the communities if you want to communicate to them, you know, how you're approaching your material management, or if you just want to work behind the scenes and know you're being protective and responsible. So, okay, well, I'll move over to wastewater and I'll try to make sure I don't run under or over. I know we spent a lot of time on the drinking water treatment material. I'll just provide some general observations related to wastewater waste or biosolids. Again, there's as with water, there's a big variety of treatment methods, and then there are byproducts, co-products, waste materials, whatever we're going to call them, that result from the mechanical and biologic treatment processes. When it comes to the screenings, the grit, fats, oil, and grease, you know, those are typically managed with getting them to a solid waste landfill. Biogas, I think, is a little out of our scope today, and what's resulting is the biosolids or sludge component of the processed materials. And biosolids obviously constitute the largest volume of materials from the process. Ohio's biosolids program, administered by the EPA, they hit on this disposal and beneficial use under biosolids. They want to protect, encourage beneficial use, and minimize any nuances from nuisances from odors. And so I think that's a pretty straightforward statement there from the agency. I grabbed a 19 statistic. I don't know if the 20 statistic was out there, but this chart shows some of the dry tons produced for the different materials of sewage sludge out there, and you could see a lot of the material in 19 going to the landfill. Again, I've talked to people that from 19 to 20, a lot of that landfill material has shifted to land application. And you can look at what materials are exceptional quality versus Class B biosolids. So there's a fair amount of material being generated that needs to be monitored. I think that in, let me just move on there. As far as regulatory authority, we see the word sewage, sludge, and biosolids. I just posted these. Everybody here knows this, but basically biosolids is sewage sludge that's been treated for beneficial use. So some people use the terms interchangeably. They're different, but similar or a subset of each other. The most recent sewage sludge rules out there were as part of the 5-year rule review. December of 18, they became effective, so they won't be looked at again until 22 to be effective in 2023. Just barely clearly lists out the standards for treatment, storage, transfer, disposal, biosolids, including beneficial use. So I would say the sewage sludge can be managed in a landfill, but a lot more people over time are moving, I would say, back to land application for agronomic purposes. Once the biosolids are ready for beneficial use, they could be land applied if it's authorized. Again, a very sustainable practice. There are some exclusions out there. I mean, your grit and screenings and stuff have to still go to the landfill. Under your NPDES permit, you're required to list. You're required to include a list of material in your permit application. So it's everything to your volumes. There's some material characterization, sampling analysis, some information about your biosolids, and there may be some permit-specific conditions that are in your NPDES permit that address use of biosolids, Class B biosolids, and some other items. So really, I've always heard of terms about Class A, Class B biosolids over the years, and then over time, this term exceptional quality came out. And so we either have Class B or exceptional quality biosolids within the context of these regulations. And while there's a million different iterations of how you fit into classifying your material, there are some things that look at pathogen reduction, at bacteria reduction, vector attraction reduction, and of course the metal concentration limits. And when you look at your material and you characterize it to comply with the rules, you'll know about your classification of your material, and then you could look at your beneficial use of the material and what your compliance criteria are going to be. So before you can beneficially use your biosolids, there's a list of items you have to cover from submitting notice, where you're going to use it. Each field for Class B will have to be have a separate authorization. But information about location, some information about the soils where you're applying the material, the slope, setback criteria, some things about the history, and recent test results. So again, nobody knows this more than you guys, but it's still in the rules. Pretty clear on what you have to characterize to make sure where you apply your materials are the appropriate place. I've listed this information with storage of the materials in the field. There's criteria on how long the material can be in the field, what your setbacks are, and it's based on your biosolid classification. As it comes to uses, the exceptional quality biosolids, we say the really good stuff, can go to landscaping or garden or be used in agronomic applications. The Class B solids can't be used for landscaping and gardening, and you could land apply it based on a calculated agronomic rate. Pretty straightforward. You guys have been doing this for years. There are some restrictions about how you place it on saturated soil, snow, precipitation events, and of course your pollutant loading, potential pollutant loading. Your isolation distance for biosolids. The earlier slide listed Class B biosolids, but some of the storage requirements, but this is for all biosolids. And again, the table breaks it down here to how you apply the biosolids in the agronomic applications, whether it's injected or surface. There's just a little reminder chart. I guess this whole packet, it's a nice little condensed package. And there's some sampling methods and frequencies based on the monitoring frequency. That's you have to monitor based on the monitoring frequency in your NPDES permit, as well as based on the volumes you're land applying. So some issues I see out there, similar but different from the water side of things. On the wastewater side of things, in your material management, biosolids. Again, PFAS is on the list. I've added pharmaceuticals to the list. Some people are interested in studying that further and understanding different pharmaceuticals that end up being processed through your system, if there's any residuals in your solids. And also funding is always an issue out there. So I think it's also, our partners we're working with in the land applications, you need to make sure everything's applied correctly and we're meeting the setbacks so that we don't get a bad name or a violation for how we're managing our materials. And I know also that, as infrastructure ages, how people are handling their material, looking at your dewatering facilities, are they aging, is technology changing? What can you do to better manage your material, have a drier material that you might be able to feed into the commercial market? So, and there's always this challenge of what's going to happen to the regulations in the 10 years and how does that fit with your plan? So with that, I have one final question and just 2 more slides. So pass it over.
Okay, last question. Would more stringent regulations change investments of new capital to continue your biosolids program in the next decade? And that's yes or no.
And we are at about 5 minutes, so I will hold off on asking any more questions. Once we finish this poll, we can let Bill wrap everything up.
All right. We don't have everyone answered yet that has answered the others, but I'll just give a few more seconds. We'll close it at a minute and see what the results are. Okay, so it looks like 95% said yes, more stringent regulations would switch those investments.
Okay, well, not surprised with that, and I think it's a reason for us to be talking and work together and look for alternate plans and how to make sure we're going to have a home for these materials we're managing that we can afford and that's safe, safe for the environment. I just have a funding note. I'm not a funding person. Jenny Carter Cornell here at Hall, I think a lot of you know, but she had provided me with a slide on funding, and I guess everybody knows that there's a lot of money being talked about under this American Rescue Plan. Lots of people have plans for it. Some people are more engaged than others. But really, I provided this in the next slide as a takeaway, just food for thought. You know, this plan's supposed to make the necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure to help people out. The way I understand it, there's going to be a state allocation of $250 million where you develop projects and prioritize them, get them to your county engineer for consideration. Ohio, again, $250 million. And then there's other money that's within that package, and it's a whole lot of money. It's billions of dollars out there that's gonna come out there. But I just noticed that on the slide, on this next slide, that under eligible expenses, right now the way this is written, and things are developing, everybody's monitoring it. Physical infrastructure and equipment to manage sludge, biosolids, and waste is in there. So it's not for your operational trucks. It's not disposal fees and hauling, that kind of thing. It's physical infrastructure or equipment. So going back to what I said a moment ago is that systems are aging. We're planning for the next decade. There might be a funding source out there that someone in the group might find useful. You probably know more about it than I ever will, but I just wanted to include a funding slide for the group to kick around. So with that, if there's any questions or discussion, or we might be out of time here. And I'll list here that John Hall couldn't be on the call today, but he's leading one of the leaders of the water quality group at TMACOG, and you can contact him, myself, or Alan Brown, who's doing a lot with water and wastewater out there. I would want to acknowledge Harry Sarvis and his team at EPA, Northwest District EPA, City of Toledo Water and Water Reclamation helped provide some input, and again, the people at TMACOG. So with that, I'll finish up here and turn it back to TMACOG.
And thank you so much for that presentation, Bill. We really appreciate you coming by and sharing all that information. I mean, much like your bio, you have all sorts of knowledge and experience in the field, and we're really happy to have you here. And with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break. So if everyone could leave up your, make sure to leave this up as your primary screen so that it doesn't affect the participation score. But we're going to return at 1:15 for our next presentation. Thanks, everyone. Hello, everyone. So after that 5-minute break, we're going to go ahead and get moved on to our second presentation. For our next presentation, I'd like to introduce our second speaker. Jill Schiefer is the Asset Management and Loan Coordinator for the Ohio EPA Northwest District Office, Division of Drinking and Groundwaters, and she has been with the agency for over 31 years. Jill is a Bachelor's of Science from the Ohio State University and a Master's in Public Administration from Columbia Southern University and an Asset Management certification from Virginia Tech. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to her for our second presentation. Jill, I believe you're muted. Oh, try it one more time. I think I was trying to unmute you and then we got all confused.
There it is.
There we are. Yep, I can hear you.
It wouldn't let me unmute.
No problem. We got it all set.
Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yep.
Cool. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jill Schiefer. I am the Asset Management Coordinator for the district. So today we're going to go over what is asset management. We're going to go over the Ohio EPA rules. Where does my community start? The benefits of an asset management program and the metrics required. So basically, asset management can be defined as being able to provide the desired level of service at the lowest life cycle. We define desired level of service as what we want the asset to provide and we define the lowest life cost as the best appropriate cost. Assets are essentially all the equipment, the buildings, the land, the people, and the other components needed to deliver a safe and adequate drinking water. Assets generally are large pieces of components of equipment or infrastructure that can be very expensive. They usually last a very long time, so utilities really want to keep them in good shape. We all know that some infrastructure in this country is aging and failing at an alarming rate. And in reality, is we don't even know where all of our assets are. It's important to know and remember that we not only have large pieces of equipment, we also have equipment underground. So we also need to know where these pieces of equipment are also located. It is important to note all of this for asset management as an essential to protect public health as well as economic development. Ohio EPA's rule became effective November 8th of 2018. The rule allows us the ability to address asset management in a more holistically approach. The rules are located under the Ohio Administrative Code, Chapter 3745-87. Ohio is one of the few states that has asset management as a rule. The rule requires all public water systems to have an asset management program, which means that every church, every rest area, every school, every mobile home park, and community public water system in the state must have a program. The asset management rules goal is for the water system to better prepare for the future. We also want our water systems to have money saved to pay for the maintenance, the repairs, the rehabilitation, the replacement and upgrades needed to run an adequate water system. We do not want water systems to rely on grants and emergency monies to make all of their repairs. Asset management programs are to ensure the long-term viability of an asset management program. Public water systems need to do an annual review and update their asset management program as needed. Ideally, the asset management program is to be a living document and to be used to make all decisions for your water system. So our first polling question.
All right, so when did the Ohio EPA Asset Management Program rule become effective? And the options are June 25th, 1839, November 8th, 2018, October 23rd, 1972, and December 2nd, 1970.
And Jill, while we're waiting for those polling responses to come in, just one question, and if you're going to get into this later, we can just hold off, but what, can you describe the assets that are supposed to be included in the inventory for your water system under an asset management plan?
Yeah, I am going to get into that, but it's basically anything that you would use in your water system. So, I mean, it would be your elevated towers, it would be your filters, it's your labor, it's the building, the land, you know, your wells, your reservoir, you know, things like that, that are anything that has to do with the water system.
Okay, great. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more about it.
Okay,
Sarah,
we haven't had anyone else answer in about 25 seconds, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. All right, so 90% of people said November 8th, 2018.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I picked some of these dates. The June 25th, 1839, to be interesting, is the fact that that was when the first water system began in Ohio, and that was the Greater Cincinnati Waterworks. October 23rd, 1972 is actually when Ohio EPA began. And then December 2nd, 1970 is when actually US EPA began. So where does my community start? Basically, first we need to do a paradigm shift. We need to think of our water system as a business. Your community needs to think of it as such. Just like the businessman that is sitting on your water board that has their own business, your water system needs to also run like a business. So this means that you need to have enough money to cover expenses so that your water system is not running in the red. Your community water system expenses are the maintenance, your labor, your replacement of those assets, the rehabilitation of the assets, and future plans, to just name a few. The other thing is that we need to think of this as a team effort. Your community needs to work together with everybody on the team. So who is our team? Our team is made up of the operative record, your village administrator or service director, your fiscal officer, the water board, and any of the other community decision makers. You also may want to have your village engineer and other people that are knowledgeable of your water system. Clearly defined job duties helps each team member understand their role in the asset management program, and this includes staff members and non-staff members of the team. A high-level organization table that names titles and responsibilities of each member can help show the chain of command for determining the asset management. The education training is also needed for each member of the team in the area of water. This is a great time to help educate everybody on your board and also your community on what it is to maintain your water assets. Ohio RCAP does have free training available on their website for water board members and fiscal officers. The team is going to demonstrate through managerial, technical, financial capabilities to ensure the long-term viability of the water system. It is very important that all members of the team understand their role. A brief description of the water system, including the major components, the source type, the number of service connections, and the type of customers needs to be included in your asset management program. The water system will demonstrate through their capability of meeting the rule by a written description of the asset management program that will be provided to the Ohio EPA upon the request of the director. So first, it's the managerial capability. How will we do this? In order to demonstrate an adequate managerial capability, there needs to be personnel commitments that provide an effective management, operation, and finances, which need to be documented. The managerial members of the team are the water board, the village administrator, service director, the city council, etc. The team must demonstrate ownership accountability, including legal authority to take measures necessary for construction, operation, and maintenance of the water system. This includes maintaining staff skills, resources, and prioritizing the continuous improvement of the water system. Must also demonstrate the owner has full commitment to properly operate and maintain the water system per Ohio EPA rules. The managerial team must ensure proper operation of the water system at all times. They must ensure the continued proper operation of the public water system through succession planning, such as having a contingency plan in place for your critical personnel. Your critical personnel, we're mainly defining as that operator of record. If you're a class one water plant, your class 1 operator must be present 3 times a week for a total of an hour and a half. If your operator becomes sick or is on vacation or other things that happened, we know during COVID time periods, unfortunately, that we've had this past year, there still has to be somebody that is there 3 times a week for a total of an hour and a half, and they must be at least a class 1 or higher operator record. So we must have plans in place to make sure that we do have personnel on site. So we need to plan ahead and make sure that we have somebody already on board for this. If your water system has had significant deficiencies that have been cited in the past or during, that would be during your site visit, and we can cite them during screenings also. There is a training that can be required by Ohio EPA that will need to be also taken. We're also looking to make sure that we have written standard operating procedures for your security. So you must write down what security, how you do your security. So if that is that everything is locked, that you have cameras, that your fence around the plant is always locked or it's unlocked when people are on site. The wellheads, that they're protected. How do we protect those? Are there fencing around it? Do we have buildings around it? Whatever, are they locked? The tower, same thing. Do we have a fence around it that's locked at all times? Are the hatches all locked? Things, all security measures that we need to take place. We also need to have a standard operating procedure for use of system equipment. Normally, this is in your personnel handbooks, but we need to bring it into the asset management program. The other thing is the billing practices and revenue collection. Most everybody already has this, but are you following them? Are you billing all of your customers? Do all your customers have meters? On your revenue collection, are you following through if people do not pay, if your customers do not pay for their water, what happens? Do you shut off their water? Do you have a practice to do that? Then are you charging them to reinstate the water? Things like that. All of that takes time for somebody to go out. Are you covering the cost that it takes for your personnel to go out and do that? We also need purchasing authority, both internal and external, and for emergencies. We do all include this within our operating plan. Next, we have our technical members that would provide the technical capability of the assets, such as the current operation and maintenance of the water system assets. This basically is the heart of the program. We're going to start with a schematic. As you see here, we have a schematic. This is of a surface water system. So we're going to look at the source. Where is the water coming from? Is it coming from the wells? Is it coming from the reservoir? Is it coming from a lake, like this example? Or do we get water from a nearby community? Then we need to show the components. We need to list out the components that we have in the water plant. You know, the clarifier, the filters. Do we just chlorinate the water? Whatever it is, we need to include it there. Then we need to move out into distribution and include our towers and our booster pumps if we have that in our system. So the first step in managing our assets is to do the inventory. And this basically is the crucial part of the system. You need to do a list, and then you have to do surveys of your assets to assure what they are. Again, we're going to include our source, our treatment, our transmission lines, and our distribution infrastructure. So the best thing to do is just ask ourselves, what do we own? I mean, literally write them down. When were they installed? What was the purchase date? Because some of this information has been lost over time or is difficult to find, we need to use our best estimate that we have. Eventually, over time, as we rehabilitate and replace these assets, we will update our inventory and this information will be more accurate. But the assets that we're going to include would be the water billing, the wells. I mean, you can write down wells, or you can write down well 1, 2, 3. To begin with, the simplest thing to do is to just write down wells. The treatment, at least identify out what that is, that you have filters, softeners, the different type of treatments that we have. You can group your high service pumps together, or you can individually put them out. Out in distribution, we're going to have backflow preventers, the clear well that we would have at the plant. Our water lines, where are they located? I mean, it could be the fact that they're located on Main Street. You know, what is the size? How many feet do we have? What is the type of pipe? You know, are there hydrants on that line? The manholes, the valves. And then we also want to make sure that we're listing the towers. The other thing is that we're going to list where it is. So we want to know, is it in use? Is it out of service? Is it on a shelf like a backup chlorinator that we're going to have that Ohio EPA requires? Where is that located? Is it also something that's located at the wastewater plant, like that portable generator that you have that you're sharing between departments? This is just in a simple Excel spreadsheet that shows you how you write it down. And in this case, I mean, they wrote down the different things. It's just an overall basic way of recording those assets. We are not requiring you to use anything expensive. There are lots of programs out there. If you wish to use those, that's up to you. We're not requiring you to have an engineering firm do it for you. If you wish to do that, you can do that. But that is not a requirement of the rule. We just want you to write down the assets. And ideally, you know, we want this in a digital format. So for ease of updating, also being able to share it with Ohio EPA or sharing it between departments. Because a lot of times your water plant and your distribution system personnel are different. And we want to make sure that we can able to share information back and forth. So once we have our assets written down, we need to determine what the condition of our assets are. So the question to ask ourselves is, what is the condition? Is it in excellent shape, good shape, fair, poor? Is it needed repair or replacement? Do we have a history of the maintenance on this asset? Are the repairs written down? There are many different ways to determine condition depending on the capability of the resource of your system. The simplest approach is to gather your team together who have the current and historical knowledge of the water system into a room, and then go through and rate your assets. This is why maintenance programs and maintenance documentation is very important to have that written down. If you haven't done a good job to this point, start doing it now. Make sure that you're writing down your maintenance and making sure you're documenting it as well as possible. The team then can select the condition ranking of the asset. You can use it from excellent to unacceptable, 1 to 5, A to F. It doesn't really matter how you do it, as long as you're doing it consistently and you're doing it. This approach uses the best information available, but does not require the system to gather additional information. Then once you get there, if you don't have all that different information, then you could go to the next step after that initial rating, then start gathering more data, and then having more sophisticated means in re-rating those assets. Also at that point, you might want to also start then to break out the assets so that you have your wells rated as 1, 2, or the well numbers as 1, 2, 3, and 4, that you have your high service pumps as 1, 2, 3, whatever you have, so that you're breaking everything out. So I have an example here of water pipes that can be evaluated by using leak detection technology. Then you take that information and then you make a more sophisticated numbering system off of that, or you modify your current rating system to give you more detail. So in other words, leak detection is going to tell you where the leaks are in town. You would then have information that you would have documented the number of leaks for that system, the number of breaks that you would have had, different things like that. If you aren't collecting that information, you need to start collecting that information now. Then we want to know the remaining useful life of our assets. We need to estimate this based on the current condition and the performance of the asset. All assets will eventually reach the end of their useful life. Some assets will reach this point sooner than others. Depending on the type of asset, it will either reach that point through use or length of service. We can determine remaining useful life by projected useful life tables or decay curves. For example, a pump will wear out sooner if it's used on a continuous basis. A pump will last longer if it's used less. Basically, this is why we alternate pumps. Normally we have 3 pumps. There's only 2 here, but we alternate back and forth by each cycle, by each day, however you're doing it, just so that that pump has time to recover. So basically on pumps, we don't use the age of the pump, we use the hours that that pump has been used. So, but on the other hand, on a water pipe, we're going to use the number of breaks that we have on that line. We're going to look at the soil condition. We're going to look at how it was installed. A lot of times we know by the year that what type of pipe that it is. We know that some of the cast irons and the ductile irons, there's a difference between older ones and newer ones. There were problems during like World War II that the type of metals that were used were different than they would have been used early on and as of today. And a lot of this information too, you can use pipe ID to help determine that. Soil, the condition of your soil is a big deal. Is the soil corrosive? Is it attacking that pipe? Also the insulation. Did we put, is the pipe laying on a nice bed of stone? Did we put enough in there? Or is it laying directly onto the soil? I mean, there's different ways of that. That's the reason the history of the system is very important as into how they put stuff in. This brings us into our next polling question.
All right, so true or false? You don't need a team to do an asset management program for the Ohio EPA.
And Jill, while we're waiting for those poll responses to come in, just one question for you. What if a facility does not know the age or the history of their treatment plant or any of their assets?
If they don't know them, that's very frequent, especially on our smaller systems. The best thing to do is to just estimate. I mean, over time, you will get to know what the age is because as you replace or rehabilitate it, you will get a more accurate asset management or inventory of that asset. But it's not a problem. Just go on, do the best you can, and move forward.
Great. I'm sure everyone appreciates that flexibility. Sarah, how's the poll?
Everyone has answered, so I will share those results. All right, looks like 68% said that it's false, so that you do need a team for your asset management program.
Yes, you do. It's supposed to be a team effort. I mean, not everybody's going to know. You're not going to know all the answers, and it's best to work together with your manager, your technical, and your financial teams. So next, we need to determine what assets are most critical to run our water plant. Because assets fail, how you manage the consequences of the failure is vital. Not every asset presents the same failure risk or is equally critical to your water system. Therefore, it's important to know which assets are required to sustain your water system's performance. Critical assets are those you decide have a high risk of failing. They're old, they're poor. And the major consequences if they do fail, that it's a major expense, the system will fail, safety concerns, etc. You can decide how critical each asset is and rank them accordingly. Many water systems may have already accomplished this through analysis in their vulnerability assessments. So basically, you need to ask yourself, how is this asset going to fail? How do the assets fail? What is the likelihood or the probability of the asset and the consequences of that asset failing? What is the cost to repair the asset, which usually is the most important thing for a lot of systems? And what are the other costs? So is there going to be a social, environmental, etc., that are associated with the asset's failure? So once you get to this point, then you're going to rank them again. You're going to answer the questions that I had on the previous slide, and you're going to refer to this slide for the examples as an example, so that you're going to have your criteria of, is it minimum, low, immediate, high, or critical. Note again, you give a number to the probability and the consequences of the failure. Again, we can use charts like I have here, conducting a failure analysis like the root cause analysis, a failure mode analysis. Those are also available out there. Determining the probability of failure and listing the asset by failure type. Analyzing failure risk and consequences. Again, use the asset decay curves, and reviewing and updating the system's vulnerability assessment if your water system was required to do one of those. But we also need to keep in mind that you have to meet drinking water standards. To this point, we have figured out what we have in the condition of our assets. We need to know the approved design capacity of our water system to make sure that we know what our future needs are. We need to know this capacity because we need to know, are we getting close to that design capacity? When we produce our water, are we running under design? Are we running the water system at design to make sure that we're running it at a shorter time period during the day? Or are we only running a few components? Some water systems are set up like a membrane filtration plants. Those are to be ran at design rate. That is the point of them. If you try to shorten the time period or make them run longer, you take consequences that you can get failure of the assets quicker. Ohio EPA approves all design and changes to your water system components. This is to ensure that the standards are being met. This is why we require plans for all substantial changes, and you should check with Ohio EPA before, like making any substantial changes. Design standards are outlined in Ohio EPA's guidelines for design for small water systems, that we use this for groundwater systems that are small, like our factories, our mobile home parks, and our very small communities out there. For larger water systems, we use the recommended standards for water design, which also is known as 10 state standards. Also, most water systems receive violations due to not being able to meet the current standards. This could be in the form of the fact that the pump is in disrepair. A lot of times that's because we haven't set aside money to do that. Other common violations are the fact that we haven't cleaned out our basin recently, or we haven't checked those basins. Again, this is because sometimes could be for the fact that we don't have the redundancy. We can't bypass that basin to take it out of service to do that. This is why redundancy of our treatment system is very important. This is also why we need to do repairs as quickly as possible. If you are finding yourself into a situation where you're having problems, you need to talk to Ohio EPA, and we usually work with you to come up with a timeline of when you're going to get that repair, the replacement, or the rehabilitation of that asset, to make sure that we're all on the same page. Once we know the condition, the remaining useful life of the asset, we need to prioritize our assets. And this is based on the criticality and the condition of the asset. It is critical that we know which ones are critical components, like, is it the well that we have to have? Is it in poor condition, or is it in need significant repair? Also, what is the economic value of that asset? How much is it to replace that asset right now and in the future? So we need to make sure that we're looking at that and making sure that we have it accounted for that too. Then the financial members will provide the funds needed to maintain and replace the asset. In order to demonstrate adequate financial capability, the water system should include a long-term funding strategy to support asset management planning implementation, including but not limited to the identification of the sources, the amount of the funds to the finance, the needed repairs, the rehabilitation and replacement or expansion of those assets. We also need to look at the debt services. You need to know what your funding programs are. We do have loans out there. You also could be lucky enough to get one of those grants. And like Bill just said, President Biden's American Rescue Plan is out there in the state of Ohio, that is being implemented by the Department of Development, and that's going through the county engineers. We were in hope that we were going to get some of that or be part of that implementation, but we weren't, so we have to rely on them. Sound financial decisions in developing an effective long-term funding strategy are critical to the implementation of your asset management program. Knowing the full economic cost and revenue generated by your water system will enable you to determine your water system's financial forecast. Your water system financial forecast can then help you decide what changes need to be made to your system's long-term funding. So you basically, again, need to ask yourself some more questions. Do you have enough funding to maintain your resources at the level of service that you expect or that your customers expect? Are your rate structures sustainable for your system's long-term funding needs? The operation and maintenance, the personnel, and the capital budgeting account for an estimated 85% of a typical water system expenses. Asset management enables a system to determine the low-cost option for providing the high level of service over time. Just like our cars, we must do normal maintenance, like oil changes, like tune-ups and tire rotations. If we don't take care of our cars, they will break down. You will need to optimize the work of your operation and maintenance crew. You need to know what they're doing, where are they doing it, and why are they doing it. An asset management program helps make risk-based decisions by choosing the right project at the right time and for the right reason. Again, you can ask yourself some more questions. What alternative strategies exist for managing our O&M, our personnel, and our capital budget accounts? What strategies are the most feasible for your organization? What are the costs of the rehabilitation, the repair, and the replacement of that critical asset? Whoops. Got a little trigger happy there, sorry. So with our best practices included, we need to move from reactive maintenance to preventive maintenance or proactive maintenance. We need to know the cost and the benefits of rehabilitating versus replacement. Because you don't always have to replace, or we don't need to run it till it needs to be replaced. We need to look at the life cycle cost, especially for those critical assets again. We need to deploy resources based on the asset condition. We need to analyze the cause of the asset's failure to develop specific response plans. Proper O&M of the system's assets are necessary elements of an effective asset management program. Proper use and service of assets are important to the long-term viability of the water systems. The strategy of O&M varies based on each asset's components, or criticality, condition, and operation history. A system should maintain a record of each asset's maintenance, history, needs, and cost. This component should discuss the system's operational activities, for example, the basic activities needed to keep the water system running, and the maintenance activities, such as activities that keep an asset in good working order. These include standard operating procedures, alternative operating procedures, emergency procedures, routine maintenance, preventive maintenance, emergency reactive maintenance, deferred maintenance. The plan does not need to include all of this information contained within the system's O&M manual, but it should refer to specific aspects that are needed to run your system. The next thing is that our water rates. Our water system main revenue comes from our water meters. Ohio EPA rule requires your water system to show through documentation that all customers are being billed for water. Every service connection should have a water meter, no matter what, even if it is the one that's owned by the village or the city, whatever, on your own property. You need to read their meters. That includes your own ones that you own, the village hall, whatever. You need to read those meters to account for the amount of water that you have out there. And water meters should be read on a monthly basis. It helps for you to determine your water loss, determine where your water is going at all times. Ohio EPA rules require that the water rates be reviewed every 3 years. The rules do not require that you increase your rates. The rule requires that you evaluate those rates every 3 years, and we're looking for documentation. The documentation can be through the fact that the fiscal officer board or whatever committee talked about it, that the water committee talked about it, that the council talked about it. Wherever it's written down, keep that with your asset management program. Water rates are to cover all the cost. your operation, your labor, your maintenance, and planning for the future. There is never excessive money in a water system program. Funds should be set aside for that maintenance, replacement, and rehabilitation of your assets. We need to make sure that you're not operating in the red. This is why that you need to follow your own rules within your system. And if you're not paying, and if somebody's not paying your water bill, that you're out there shutting their water off. That again, that you're charging for them to come back on because it takes time for your labor to go out and do that. Keep in mind, people do have cell phones that cost $1,000 that they're buying that phone for. They all have cable. There's no reason that they shouldn't be able to pay for their water. Water is not free. Other system revenues include the user fees, your hookup fees, your standby fees, late fees, penalties, reconnection fees. Keep in mind that, again, all your labor that goes out and does anything with those, you need to be able to cover that cost. Like I said before, you need to have a way of that you're projecting for the short term. So that is called a capital improvement plans, become CIPs. So you need to do an annual projection for a 3 to 5 year planning period. The rule requires that you list what the project year it is going to be in, that you have it planned for, that you have the detail of each project, the need of why you need that project, the estimated cost of the project, and this is to include the engineering design and construction and the funding source for that project. And that can be that you're going to get it from loans, or you're going to get it from your water reserves, or you're planning to get the free money that from the American Rescue Plan. Like Bill said, unfortunately, we don't know how fast this is going to go through. There's funds there, but we don't know how fast Ohio is going to get it, and we're still we have to rely on the Department of Development for that. So again, we were hoping that we would have control of that because we, as Ohio EPA, know where our needs are for water, as well as our surface water division knows where the needs are for the surface water plants also. You also need to do a 5 to 20 year CIP. You need to look at the significant projects out there that you're planning for. This could be your meter replacement program. Meters don't last forever. Again, the meters are where you get most of your revenue from. You need to make sure those meters are working. So you need to have programs out there to replace those meters, making sure that they're working. Are you taking your meters in and out, making sure that you're checking to make sure they're working? Water line replacements. Again, water lines don't last forever. Pump replacement, motor replacement, and your generator replacement. The reason we're looking at a 20-year CIP is because that's what US EPA has us doing in what we call needs surveys. We do every 5 years, we look at the needs for the state of Ohio and we fill those out, and we're trying to get money for our loan program from that. Remember, again, we don't have excessive funds. We need to put money into accounts like your tower program to make our upgrades to our system. So let's look at our tower. AWWA, American Water Works Association, says that a tower should be inspected every 5 years. Ohio EPA, we expect you to have that tower inspected every 3 to 5 years. When we come out to do a survey, that's what we're looking for. Normally, we paint a tower on the inside about every 10 to 15 years, and normally on the outside about 7 to 10 years. That isn't free. You need to have the money available to do that. Also, the coatings, the time projected for that, as these coatings get better and better over time, they do last longer and longer. So we can take that out farther and farther. But again, we still need to have funds available. Also, we need to plan to replace that tower. That tower is not going to last forever. 50, 70 years. I mean, I have one that's coming through our loan program right now that is 80 years. I've seen towers that are 100 years, over 100 years old, and the water system didn't have the funds to replace it because they weren't setting aside. And they were trying to figure out how they were going to do that. And normally did it by raising rates. An ounce of prevention can extend the life of your asset. So since money doesn't grow on trees, the sources of the funding for the overall operation and maintenance of the water system including your asset repair, replacement, and rehabilitation, including the following: your system revenue, your system reserve funds, your system generated replacement funds, and then you have your non-system revenues, which are your state loans, federal loans, or a combination of both. Sorry, get trigger happy, I guess. So the other thing is that also we're going to look at as part of your asset management program that needs to be included is that we're going to look at your income statements, your balance sheet, your statement of cash flow of the water systems operating fund. We're going to look at the amortization schedule of all your water systems debt, including all the outstanding debt. We're going to look at the long-term debt anticipated for the next 5 years of operation. We're going to look at those water rates again, evaluation for the past 3 years. All service connections need to be billed, metered, and billed. And we need to look at the existing information on your bond and credit rating if that is available for your system. Also in this rule is that community water systems must have a written contingency plan. We do make it also for all the public waters. All the public water systems have some type of contingency plan, but a community water system is going to have to have a contingency plan in accordance with 3745-85. We do have a template available on our website for this. The rule requires that you must annually update your contingency plan. It also requires that if you have made any changes whatsoever, like in personnel, that the contingency plan is updated at that point. You also must exercise each section of your contingency plan at least once every 5 years. Normally, you can do this through a tabletop exercise. You can do this during your weekly safety meetings. You can do this as part of the generator that operates once a month, things like that. You just need to make sure you're writing it down. And we do have a form available on our website, and we normally ask you to use that. And like Bill told you before, we review rules every 5 years, and currently the contingency plan rule is being reviewed, and we are making changes to that. So the template will be available on the website, will be updated. So make sure that you're looking for that. We also make sure that we're planning for emergencies. By planning for these emergencies, we can save costs over time. So as some of you may know, this past winter, several cities in Texas had weather that dropped below 0. If you don't know, their water lines aren't typically below frost lines like they are in the state of Ohio, because we have freezing weather. So we put the water lines below, at least 4 feet below ground so that they don't freeze. Well, they don't do that in Texas. They don't normally do that in Texas. So several of the water systems, they planned ahead. They planned ahead by putting their staff on scheduled overtime. So they basically scheduled them into their overtime. They shut off and drained fountains in the town. They went through and had homeowners that had anything that was basically had water in it outside that would have water streaming into it. They had those homeowners shut those off and drain those so that they wouldn't freeze. They made sure that what homeowners had small streams of water going at all times. So basically they turned on taps to make sure water was moving through those service lines and everything, which is something that a lot of us already know about because we have mobile home parks that do this because they end up having problems also. Trying to prevent that from freezing. They made sure they had parts of what they thought was going to break ahead of time, so they could make their breaks or make those repairs quickly. Basically, they saved the city a lot of money during these emergencies, and it made less inconvenience to their water systems. We could do this also by GISing our maps and making sure that we have that over time, that we have that information available within our GIS programs. Not everybody can afford that, but ideally, if we aim towards doing GIS of our system, that would be great. Ohio RCAP and Ohio Rural Water is out there available to help our smaller systems at a minimum fee. They're also your engineering firms and also out there, but you also can do it yourself, buy the equipment and just do it all yourself. This helps the water system keep the location of the valves, also noting the number of turns, so that if you are in an emergency situation, that if you know that it's an X number size line and it turns X number of times, that let's say it's 20 turns and that you're getting to 18, that if you have adrenaline running because you're in an emergency situation, you know, to 18, you need to start slowing down as you're turning that valve. Because if you overturn it, you just broke that valve. You just created another problem, another emergency, another thing that needs to be fixed, as well as the line that you're already fixing. So those are things that are important. A lot of times you have people that come in and help you, so that helps. Your fire hydrants is another example. You need to know which way your fire hydrants turn so that you make sure that your fire department knows that how they're turned, so that the responding fire department, that could be the fire department next door, that they know that yours are right turn, whereas theirs are left turn, or, you know, and vice versa. Those are things that are important. Again, they can break them and you just created another problem, another thing that you have to repair, and it takes you longer to get those repairs done. If you don't have GIS, the best thing to do is just start documenting your latitude and longitude of your assets basically out in your distribution. We recommend that you do it in the water plant also. That does sound ridiculous, but it's so that, again, so you know where your assets are. It just helps you locate those assets again. One of the things with the GIS programs that are out there too, you can take pictures. So you can take a picture of that valve. You can take a picture of the valve cover. You take pictures of what basically is around the area so that you know you're in the right area. I've had water systems that have flooded and they had to use landmarks to figure out where the valves were, just to turn the valves off because the water line closest to the river, that it shifted and it broke and their water system was losing pressure. So the easiest way to do that is to count off of a telephone tower is what they used, or whatever. The other thing is that people are visual. So the other thing is to take pictures of what's going on in the water plant. So take a picture of that high service pump, take a picture of that motor, show how over time that it is deteriorating, how the asset is wearing out. Then you can show the council how that is wearing out and everything, and that they can understand that, you know, this is what it looked like at day one, and this is what it looks like now. This is why we need to replace it. You should always have extra parts available on site. We do require that you have a backup chemical feeder for every chemical point, and it's required too that you have a minimum of 30 days for each one of your chemicals that you need. This is nothing new for a lot of you. The next thing we have, check the time, come on. I have 5 minutes. Next thing that is required in the plan is the source water protection plans. Basically, we want to make sure that you're reviewing these. Every 5 years, you know, they need to be evaluated and revisions need to be made. If you have an endorsed water protection plan, you need to make sure that you're reviewing those. If you have the checklist that you've had to fill out for us, that requires that you review those every 5 years. And then you need to make sure when you do make those revisions that you have notified Ohio EPA within 60 days of that. You can work in our office, you can work with Richard Krieger. He will help you with everything about that. Basically, we're just trying to make sure that you're looking at that. That takes us into poll question number 3.
Okay, so what is the benefit of an asset management program? Will you save money over time, prolong the asset's life, improve your response to emergencies, or all of the above?
And Jill, I'll just ask a quick question while we're waiting. And as you noted, we have about 5 more minutes in this presentation, so I don't know how in-depth you'll be able to get with the response. But with, in the last year with COVID, have you received any changes or updates to asset management plans to account for, all the changes that COVID threw our way? A lot of issues that folks probably didn't realize they'd have to consider?
Well, it took longer for people to determine what their assets were because they had restrictions that they couldn't go out. They couldn't be near the homeowners and everything. Some water systems were able to do a lot of things faster because they could go out because there's nobody bothering them. People couldn't be near them, so they could go through and check all their meters and stuff like that. I worked with a lot of systems, that did screenings, or they had provided us information about their written descriptions, and they weren't able to meet their timelines, which wasn't a problem. Just as long as they told me ahead of time, we were able to move their dates. The thing we did find about the COVID was the personnel. We did have several operators that unfortunately did get COVID, and they were on respirators and they couldn't talk. I mean, they couldn't talk to anybody. Some water systems were like, now what? So that was why the planning for the future, making sure that you have that succession planning, that operator that you're going to have come in and help you, that you know who they are, and that you basically have that contract in place. And they've been to the water plant and they know where everything is, and they can read the contingency plan, or they know what has to be done daily for that. Because every plant runs differently. Every plant has those unique little things. Every plant has unique little sounds, and you need to know what those are.
All right, thanks for your response on that. Sarah, how's the poll?
We have everyone responded, and it looks like 100% answered all of the above.
Thank you. So the next is the benefits of your asset management program. Again, we're going to just go over this since I only have 5 minutes. We'll go on. So we've talked about this, the benefits of prolong your assets life, aid in rehabilitation, replacement decisions through an effective and focused operation and maintenance program. It'll help meet your customer demands with a focus on the system sustainability, and it will help you set rates on a sound operation and a financial plan. Also, it will help you basically stop flushing money down the drain. Again, meet the service expectation and regulatory requirements. It will help you use best use practices. Again, it will help you improve responses to emergencies. It'll improve your security and safety of those assets. And also, it'll give you a way that in your CCR, you can inform the public about what you're doing to improve your water system and show them what you're using their money for. So another part of the rule is the metrics requirement. Metrics are required annually every year. Metrics are open right now, and they close November 15th. You're required to report your operation ratio, and the operation ratio is the expense divided by the revenue. You're required to report the operating cost to reduce water per service connection, and that is the expense divided by each service connection. Whoops, now what? Went the wrong way, sorry. You need to do breaks per 10 miles of distribution pipe. So we need to know the total number of breaks you had for total mile of the 10 miles. You need to figure out your non-revenue water. Basically what water out there that you produced that you didn't get paid for.
Jill, I'm sorry to interrupt. I do want to note that we are not seeing your slides. I'm still seeing the poll. So I don't know if that's an issue with the screen share or if we need to take that poll down.
I don't know.
I closed it and I clicked hide, and it's not giving me any other options besides sharing it again. So I could try to share and then re-hide.
Can you see it now?
I still see the poll.
Okay.
Sorry about this.
I don't know.
I think Matt might be trying to figure out something on his end. But meanwhile, if you are okay going forward,
Yeah.
we'll hopefully get
Yep.
those slides back up there in a moment.
Yeah. So the other thing is for the metrics is the maintenance task per year on your vertical assets. Vertical assets are the tower, the things that you see, the things that are vertical. I mean, it's as simple as that. The things above ground. So that'd be the water plant, the pump stations, your storage facilities. You must track your maintenance performed on those vertical. Okay. And then you must also do the planned maintenance. What did you plan for versus unplanned? So basically, a lot of times that's your emergencies. Then you must choose one additional asset to our metric to track. So that could be your disruption of service, the number of complaints, your call center indicators, customer service cost per account, billing accuracy, residential service connections, service affordability, delinquency rate, low income, anything that has to do with your water system, do it. So that takes us to another polling question. Should we just read the polling question? Here we go.
All right, so true or false, your community's contingency plan only needs to be updated once per year. Looks like we're pretty quickly going to get to everyone submitting, so.
And Jill, after this poll closes, if you could try resharing your screen, that may switch it back.
Okay.
All right, so everyone has answered.
It's not going to let me.
Split 50-50, true and false.
So the answer is false. Your contingency plan needs to be updated anytime that you have a change. So if that is that your personnel changed or your equipment changed or whatever, it needs to be updated at any time. So it's not letting me there. Can you see it now?
Yep, now it came back.
Huh, sheesh. Nothing like
Not sure
having
that
issues.
the joys of technology on that one.
Yeah, I love technology, but we're almost done. Your asset management program is never done, and an effective asset management program requires continued revision and refining. We do have loans, like I said. We have the water supply revolving loan account out there. It's available for planning, design, and construction. We will take a planning design. We take planning and design loans at any time. Construction loans are due every year by March 1st. We do a screening as part of your asset management program during that time period. Basically, we're going to relook at your asset management program, and everything I told you here is what we're going to look at. And currently, we have principal forgiveness for those lead line, service line replacement projects. We still have money available. So if you have lead service lines, you please put in for those loans. If you don't know, the new updated lead and copper rule by US EPA states that if you don't know what the line is, it is lead. The other thing is that Biden does have money out there, which we're hoping to see, that he wants 100% lead out. Again, we don't know where that's coming from. We think it's going through the Department of Development. We're still waiting, just like you, to see where that's going to go. So more information is available on our website. If you go to our website, it's under asset management. Go to drinking water. If you can't find it, shoot me an email. I can help you find it. We do have an asset management hotline. The phone number is available there. And we do have an asset management email. Somebody monitors the hotline and the emails several times a day and will reply to you as soon as they possibly can. So plans are nothing and planning is everything. It's a Dwight Eisenhower quote. And with that, are there any questions?
Thank you so much for presenting, Jill. I think at this point we're going to have to move on from questions just because we're right at the end of our time limit. So we'll be wrapping up the webinar here, but thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, thank you for attending this second session of the TMACOG Water Wastewater Operator set trainings. Just wanted to give some brief wrap-up notes so that everyone can make sure to receive their contact hours. So if you'll submit the contact hour request form back to TMACOG staff, and hopefully we'd like to have this back by the end of the day today. As a note, if you didn't receive that contact hour form, it's currently available right now under the handouts section of the webinar platform. And also you can email TMACOG staff if you need one as well. We'll be providing contact hours to all attendees who met the minimum requirements for participation. We'll notify attendees for contact hours via email, and we'll be provided with a certificate of attendance or a certificate of those contact hours received. We'll also upload all qualified attendees to the OEPA website within 30 days. And I'd also just like to remind you again that the survey at the end of the webinar is mandatory. And let us know how we did today so we can figure out how to do that better next time. Thank you everyone for attending. Just want to put out a note that there is our final session will be on Thursday at the same time. I look forward to anyone coming by for that one as well. But I'd like to thank our presenters for coming by today and being able to do that. Also want to mention that up on the screen right now is the contact hour information so that you can put that down on your request form. And in an hour after the presentation closes, there'll also be a follow-up email which will have that information as well. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for coming by to this for this training session, and I look forward to seeing everyone at the next one. Thank you.